Time for some questions, if anybody has a round.
So what do you think is the likelihood of possibly adopting some type of proportional representation system for the House? Like maybe let's say this member proportional, where you have a certain percentage of the House members be elected by districts, but the other one be partyless, or do it completely just be a partyless election?
That's an interesting one, isn't it? Because there's nothing in the Constitution that says states can't have proportional system. It's technically not difficult at all. And, well, it could be done in principle. The problem is both parties hate the idea. So to actually persuade people to do it, I think it's another example of requiring a social movement with a lot of energy and pushing from below.
Yeah, I wonder, what do you think about Trump in asking the question, is he providing a service? And that when in Republican debates he's been challenged about why he's given money to Democrats, that he's so open about why he has done so in terms of being able, frankly, to purchase influence. Secondly, the famous exchange between Fitzgerald and Hemingway. Fitzgerald ostensibly said, the rich are different. Hemingway said, yeah, they have more money. Based on your research, did Fitzgerald have the better of the argument? Are the rich really different?
It's not only that they have more money. I think that there are these real, pretty important differences in what they want government to do. And some of that may come from success itself. Some of it may have been there all the time. I have no insight into that. But that is it's a key point. They really are different. Now Trump, I'll try not to get started on Trump in a big way here. Very entertaining to watch. There was a time when I was thinking, Trump could provide a really good service if he's a true populist, because he can be independent of the parties. He's got his own money. And when he started to say, well, he would protect Social Security, and what are these paper pushers, these hedge fund managers and so forth doing, that they get a 15% tax rate, whatever other wealthy people are paying 40, And he sounded, at least for a while, like a genuine populist. Well, then, unfortunately, he came out with his tax plan, which is a total disaster from my point of view. He would tax hedge fund managers at the same rate as everybody else, but he taxed wealthy people in general so much lower that the hedge fund managers would come out a little better in the end. And that pattern has been repeated. I think there are various possible reasons for it. I think one is that he's realized that to win in Republican primaries, which are these low turnout elections dominated by really rather extreme party activists, he can't get away with that stuff. Whatever the reason, he's abandoned it. So my tentative enthusiasm about Trump has pretty much vanished.
So, with obviously the people that have more wealth to distribute, they affect the way politics are run in a certain way. And by trying to make more equal representation towards the lower income people, are you suggesting that you would limit the way that the wealthy are able to spend their money? Would it be imposing a limit on how they can contribute beyond what we already have? Like more strict limitations so that they can no longer influence as easily? Or how would that go about? I mean, it seems like
well, there are two parts to that, aren't there? The easy part you identified. It seems to me the easy part is trying to help underrepresented people get better represented. In order to do that thoroughly, you have to face the harder part, which is what to do about billionaires who are willing to spend, many, many billions of dollars on an election. Now, the Supreme Court, I think, has taken a wrong turn on this because its jurisprudence focuses exclusively on the issues you mentioned, basically free speech issues. And they say, well, heaven's sakes, people have money, they ought to be able to spend it. But traditionally, in that kind of situation, you would think there'd be a balancing test, that the public has an interest in political equality. The Supreme Court has simply refused to acknowledge that, pretty explicitly, way back in Buckley v. Vallejo. And it's gotten a little worse with Citizens United and so forth, but the jurisprudence has been there for a long time now. I think personally that it should be perfectly reasonable to put limits on spending at some point. Free speech should mean, I think, being able to get your ideas out. But you really don't need to spend $10 billion on politics in order to get your ideas out.
I understand some countries limit the campaign period. I think England limits it to 6 weeks. I wondered how much you thought that might help here.
That's limits the campaign period. Those are fairly common, aren't they, around the world? It seems to me it's not a bad idea. That could help quite a bit, because there's only, although we would certainly see quite an onslaught of junk over that period.
So here and then back there.
Yeah, on social movements, discuss what I call the last of the just men, and that's Ralph Nader. He's been a social movement. He's done a lot of things you talked about with trying to get billionaires behind him, and he's most recently did the convergence of the left and right in one of his books there. And the other social movement I'd like you to discuss is Occupy. How is that morphed? Where is that now in our conscience?
Well, starting with Occupy, it seems to me one of the problems with the Occupy movement was it was very hard to define goals that were feasible. And there's a lot of energy that really was expressed in that movement, and quite a few of the people who are active in it are doing other things now. So that in an odd way, that could have been an early spark of a broader social movement for equal voice. But to make a social movement work, it's got to come from a lot of different places. And if you look around, organized labor, is working on a number of these issues. NAACP, the Sierra Club, for heaven's sakes, has a democracy initiative. And Common Cause is perhaps the most prominent because Miles Rappaport is an old organizer type, and he really cares about political reform. There's an organizational element. There are a million little grassroots groups all over the country that are dealing with one piece or another of this kind of thing. And I think the ingredients are there to come together into a movement. Let's get Nader. I mean, that's good. If he's doing good things, that's fine. I thought in the year 2000 he was not a constructive force, personally.
In politics, it seems that more money is more votes, and less money is seen as less votes. Would you say that causes a big inequality in voting participation? Because it seems that those that have more money seem to get more influence in a way, because they're willing to spend more personally.
Absolutely, that's a critical thing. Sidney Verba and Kay Schlossman and Henry Brady are probably the most prominent people who've documented so well the enormous differences in engagement and participation by income and wealth. And of course, the biggest single thing is money giving. Most of the money comes from people who have a bunch of money. This is kind of elementary arithmetic. The average person can't afford big contributions. So that participation problem is huge.
Yeah, I'm just concerned, why as a people, we are consumers, and these people that have wealth, they have to get the wealth from people consuming. So why can't we mobilize and get control of how we spend that wealth to help ourselves? I mean, I can't understand. How do they get all of this wealth? Because we are consumers. Mm-hmm. So why can't we mobilize as a group of people and say, okay, this is how we want this to happen?
I think that's a creative line of thinking, that if you can think of ways to exact economic costs on people for their political behavior, I'd say more power to you. One thing we found about the 100 wealthiest billionaires is that there's a difference between billionaires who face the public directly, who sell things, like Microsoft software or, things of that sort, and people who are way behind the scenes doing something financial. And the people who face consumers are much less likely to talk about favoring unpopular policies. In one way, that kind of supports what you're saying. In another way, it makes it a little bit harder to, how do you boycott a hedge fund? Unless you've got a lot of millions to refuse to put in it, it gets hard.
Between political action committees and super political action committees and their association with 501c uses, what is the first step in preventing that? You mentioned it briefly with the dark money. What is the first step to not just limit the billionaire contributions that is federally reported, but those that aren't federally reported due to being able to use a 501c1 for?
Yeah, very important point. We've reached this point where you can give unlimited amounts of money to politics without having your name officially recorded. And investigative journalists can sometimes catch you, but often not. Well, the first step, I think, is very simple, and that's disclosure. I mean, for heaven's sakes, at least require people to register with the FEC or in some other way when they spend a lot of money on electoral politics. Beyond that, as I mentioned, in the short run, the best remedy is probably to strengthen ordinary people's voice, so that at least there's a little less inequality in voice. The billionaires are up there, but at a certain point, if everybody else is loud enough, they won't be able to sway events.
What do you lump corporations in with billionaires?
Well, corporations I didn't treat very well. When I refer to interest groups, that's mostly corporations and business associations. And it seems to me that the constitutional law ought to be significantly different from the laws that affect individuals, because business corporations are creatures of the state. They're chartered by government. They're given this authority to have limited liability. They can't be, individuals in them can't be sued. They have all kinds of advantages. And it seems to me it's perfectly reasonable for the public to say, okay, you're a corporation. One way in which we're not going to let you make money is by, in effect, bribing or influencing legislators. No political contributions by corporations. I see no reason there have to be any.
Citizens sort of change. I mean, you said citizens kind of didn't really, Citizens United, I think, was about the ruling that said that they could contribute, corporations could contribute to political actions. So it kind of said, well, that did really influence it. Maybe you were just talking about billionaires. So.
No, that's very important. The corporations have been basically unleashed, and my argument, which I didn't make very clearly or explicitly, is that the Supreme Court's gone off on the wrong track about that. I mean, when I read their opinions, it seems that they're operating just in a different world. For example, Justice Kennedy acknowledges that there's a public interest in avoiding even an appearance of bribery or dishonesty. But then he says, we don't have to worry about this appearance. Well, it seems to me it's not just appearance, it's reality. And I would hope that the Supreme Court will change its doctrine.
What do you think about removing corporate personhood from having a constitutional amendment to remove corporate personhood and also to declare that money is not speech?
Those are two rather different propositions.
Right.
Removing corporate personhood, in effect, maybe for limited purposes, but if you did it totally, it would undo the idea of a corporation, which is it's a fictional legal person that can enter into contracts. And that's what corporations do all the time. They enter into contracts. The strange thing that's happened is they're being treated as persons that have rights of free speech and assembly and these other things that are clearly
Right.
designed for human beings, not for fictional corporations. So the first part of it seems to me, political personhood makes no sense. I think that should definitely be undone. What was the second half?
Money is not speech.
Oh, yes, and that it seems to me, money is not speech is not bad as a slogan. It points in the right direction. The complexity is, of course, to some degree, money is speech. If you have none, it's pretty hard to get your thoughts out there. And you can see an argument for allowing people to spend limited amounts of money to express themselves. But on the other hand, to treat it as absolutely equivalent, equivalent in the sense that we can't put a limit on the words that people utter. And I think that's a good rule. Let people say, certain limits about fires in crowded buildings and so forth, but let people say pretty much what they want. It doesn't mean that you should give them the biggest megaphone that can be imagined and let them spend billions of dollars shouting it. I think it should be regulated.
We'll take one more question, and then Seth is going to give you some directions for the rest of the day. Go right ahead.
Yes, Dr. Page, given the divisions that we confront in our society, be it social, political, economic, racial, this social movement that you advocate, what would that be akin to?
Well, I think the closest analogies I've found have been these 19th century and early 20th century analogies. The populists were interesting because they started with small farmers, and they worked really hard to form a coalition with organized labor. Not totally successfully, but they had the right idea. That was the thing to do. I think a successful social movement, the progressives, were then much more successful, partly because they enlisted wealthy people who exacted a price, several prices. But they did have affluent, wealthy people. They were bipartisan. Woodrow Wilson and Teddy Roosevelt were both important to the progressive successes. And a very broad movement that encompassed lots and lots of people. I wouldn't necessarily say that they should be copied in every way, but in certain respects, I think they're a good model.
Thank you.
I